quick story about a young Coach Meyer. He would drive 7 hours to hear Tom Osborne speak for about 15 minutes and then drive all the way back through the night and be ready for the next day of practice. But that was his hunger, and that was such a part of the culture that we had, was a hunger for improvement, to be better, to find the next steps, no matter what it took.
Some shows don't need a celebrity narrator to introduce the show, but this show does. In a world filled with endless opportunities, why would two men who have built 13 multi-million-dollar businesses altruistically invest 5 hours per day to teach you the best practice business systems and moves that you can use? Because they believe in you, and they have a lot of time on their hands. They started from the bottom, now they're here. It's the Thrivetime show starring the former U.S. Small Business Administration's Entrepreneur of the Year, Clay Clark, and the entrepreneur trapped inside an optometrist's body, Dr. Robert Zoellner. 2 men, 8 kids, co-created by 2 different women, 13 multi-million-dollar businesses.
We started from the bottom, now we're here. We started from the bottom, and we'll show you how to get here. Started from the bottom, now we're here. We started from the bottom, now we're here.
Started from the bottom, and now we're at the top, teaching you the systems to get what we got. Colton Dixon's on the hooks, I break down the books. Z's bringing some wisdom and the good looks. As the father of 5, that's why I'm alive. So if you see my wife and kids, please tell them hi. It's the CNC up on your radio, and now 3, 2, 1, here we go.
We started from the bottom, now we're here. We started from the bottom, and we'll show you how to get here. Started from the bottom, now we're here. We started from the bottom, now we're here. We started from the bottom, now we're here. We started from the bottom, and we'll show you how to get here.
Thrive Nation, some of you like Warren Buffett, some of you don't, but we can't argue with the financial success that Warren Buffett has had. And for many years, Warren Buffett's secret weapon was a man by the name of Charlie Munger. Charlie Munger. You say, who's Charlie Munger? Well, if you look him up, Charlie Munger was a partner of Warren Buffett, and a kind of his secret weapon that behind the scenes really helped Warren Buffett be the best that he could be. Now, Charlie Munger, again, this is Warren Buffett's number 2, Warren Buffett's right-hand man. He has described today's guest in the most powerful way possible. Again, Charlie Munger, the financial guru that's behind the scenes or was behind the scenes for Warren Buffett, he has described today's guest, William Green. He's described his book as one of the best investing books ever written. Again, Charlie Munger has said that today's guest has written one of the best investing books ever written, which I don't think could be higher. You cannot receive higher praise in the self-help space. And with that being said, William Green, welcome onto the Thrivetime Show. How are you, sir?
I am very well. I'm delighted to be here with you. Thanks for having me. I'm actually in London. I'm calling in from my mother's apartment in London. So this is the first time I've ever done an interview from my mother's home.
Oh, well, okay. Well, let me ask you this here real quick. Because, Charlie Munger has endorsed you so highly, some of our listeners are saying, well, what book should I read? What book is that? Could you tell the listeners, what is the book that Charlie Munger endorsed so highly? And what is that book about?
Sure. I wrote a book called Richer, Wiser, Happier, which is subtitled How the World's Greatest Investors Win in Markets and Life. And what it's really about, it's based on hundreds of hours of interviews that I've done with about 40 of the greatest investors of all time, looking at what it is that explains their extraordinary outperformance over many years. And so what I'm trying to get at is, A, how you get richer by reverse engineering these people, but also how you actually can get smarter and wiser by figuring out how they think. And more counterintuitively, I also talk about what you can learn from their lives about how to live in a richer, more abundant, wiser, happier way.
Well, let's start with the extremes. And you go through this great book, again, Richer, Wiser, Happier. What are a couple principles? What are a couple principles that all of our listeners could immediately apply to their lives that you teach in your book, Richer, Wiser, Happier?
Well, let's start with Charlie Munger. So I wrote a chapter based on my interviews and conversations with Charlie Munger, which is called Don't Be a Fool, which is about a very profound idea from Munger, very profound and practical idea, which is that instead of trying to be smarter, we should actually focus on reducing what he called standard stupidities or unoriginal error. And what Charlie said is that basically we should follow the teachings of a great 19th century mathematician, Carl Gustav Jacobi, who said invert, always invert. And what that means is when you're trying to figure out, for example, how can I be a great investor? You invert and you say, well, let me first figure out how to be a terrible investor and then not do that. And so you think of all of the ways that people screw up as investors, right? So they believe that they can predict which way the market's going to go. They jump in and out of the market. They buy funds that are massively overpriced. They put all of their money in one asset, often when it's at its most popular. And so they get really carried away, right? They get carried away by greed and fear and other emotions. And so what Charlie says is, collect examples of stupidity, of the way people get themselves in trouble, and then say, well, let me not do that. So it's a way of solving the problem backwards. And this is a perfect example of somewhere where an idea that's really helpful in investing turns out to be really helpful in life as well. So you start to think about, okay, so how do you screw up your life? So Charlie once gave a speech at a high school where some of his 8 children and stepchildren went. And he said, look, if I can give you a guaranteed prescription for misery in life. And he starts listing all of the ways you can screw up your life. Like you become addicted to alcohol and chemicals, and you become totally unreliable, and you stay down the first time you're knocked down by some serious, disaster in your life, some great experience of adversity. And so you start to collect all of these examples of things that don't work in life. And then you say, well, okay, let me not do that. That's a very, very powerful idea. And the reason it's so powerful, according to Charlie, is that it's actually much easier to identify what not to do rather than what to do. So those are the sort of principles I'm really interested in, where you can find a particular way of thinking that these very brilliant, very pragmatic investors embody. And then you can apply it not only to get richer, but actually to be wiser.
So let's go back to the beginning here, because now, I mean, you're a very accomplished journalist, an accomplished author. Many people praise your writing, but how did you get started? Like, how did that transition happen to where you thought to yourself, you know what, before the awards, how did you decide, you know what, I want to become a financial journalist?
It's such an unlikely path. And I don't know if you found the same, that so many of our plans turn out to be almost comically misguided, right? I thought I was going to become a famous novelist and screenwriter and the like. And so I went to this school in England, famous school called Eton, which is where people like 2 of the last 3 British prime ministers or 4 British prime ministers went, and people like Prince Harry and Prince William went. And so I came out of this school and went to Oxford and studied English literature, and I thought I was going to be a great novelist. And then I kind of fell in love with the stock market in my 20s. And I thought, this is sort of the coolest thing. You can make money by actually just thinking well without getting your hands too dirty. And there was something about the game of it that I found really fascinating. But then part of what happened is that once I started to actually interview great investors for magazines like Forbes or Fortune and the like, and later Barron's and Time, I started to realize these guys are pretty amazing characters. They're almost like fictional characters. Like I would go to the Bahamas and I'd spend a day with Sir John Templeton, who was probably the greatest global investor of the 20th century. And he was then in his 80s. And here's a guy who basically would have a meeting with someone and he would say, meet me at 4:02 because I have another meeting at 4:13. And I would study people like that, and I would just think, he's almost like a fictional character. I mean, he's just so eccentric. And, as a Rhodes Scholar, right before World War II, he went off and traveled to something like 30 countries around the world, at a time when no Americans had passports. And so even then, he was giving himself a kind of informational advantage by going around the world and becoming knowledgeable about other countries. So I think part of it was just that I initially fell in love with the idea of making money without working too hard. And then I started to think, God, these guys are kind of extraordinary. And then you start to get into their lives and you start to realize, well, wait a second, it's not an accident that they're so successful. And so if I could reverse engineer what made them so successful and then share that with our readers, that would be pretty interesting. And so that's really what I set out to do, is to say to you, look, if you want to figure out how to be smarter and how to navigate uncertainty, here's what you need to do.
I'm taking copious amounts of notes here. And as I'm taking copious amounts of notes, I think to myself, I've interviewed billionaires and multimillionaires, and I find that the most successful people tend to take notes. And I find that if I meet with successful people, they tend to be fastidious about being prompt. They want to be prompt. They also want to take notes. And I start to see these common denominators over and over. I wanted to ask you, are there other common denominators that you have discovered amongst the super successful that you could share with our listeners that perhaps they could apply to their lives today?
I think one thing that was really striking to me is the fanatical intensity of a lot of the most successful people. And I remember once interviewing a guy called Will Danoff, who managed over $200 billion at Fidelity and had this amazing record over the last 25 years or so. And he said to me at one point, frankly, I just care more. And when I was interviewing another legendary mutual fund manager, a guy called Bill Miller, who had famously beaten the market for 15 years, he started talking to me about his friendship with Will Danoff. And he said, the first time I met Will Danoff was about 30 years ago. And we were introduced, and Bill Miller's kind of a friendly, charming guy. And he extends his hand to Will Danoff and says, "Hi, Will, nice to meet you." And Will Danoff doesn't extend his hand and says, "I'm going to beat you, man. I'm going to beat you." And so I think that kind of intensity, that kind of competitiveness is absolutely necessary. And you see it going through every area of their lives, right? You see, Munger spoke about Buffett as a continuous learning machine. Buffett would talk about reading 500 pages a day. So there's a kind of intensity, a willingness to keep learning. But then I think there are these more unlikely characteristics that are much harder for us to replicate, like the fact that they tend to be pretty unemotional. So I remember during the financial crisis, there was an extraordinary moment where in early 2009, Charlie Munger sees that the financial stocks are getting absolutely killed and buys Wells Fargo at what he described as the bottom tick in about March 2009, when the financial system seemed to be falling apart. And he said, well, it was a once in 40-year opportunity. And I said to him, did you feel any nerves when you did that? Like, were you afraid at all? And he said, no, not at all. And I said, so you're not fighting those emotions because you actually don't feel them? And he's like, yeah, that's right. And Warren is wired exactly the same way. So I think one of the takeaways for me was that I look at these great investors and I start to think, oh, hell, I'm actually not wired like them. I actually am pretty emotional. I'm pretty fearful. I'm kind of a neurotic writer type. And so just knowing that I'm actually not wired particularly well to win that game is incredibly helpful, because then you have this default position where you can say, well, okay, I should do what Howard Marks, one of the great investors, multi-billionaire who manages something like $200 billion, said to me, where he said, well, look, most people should index most of their money. And so I think we have this great default position, which is, if we're not wired to win this particular game, just put the money in an index fund or a couple of index funds. And over time, you're likely to do pretty well as the market goes up. It's not guaranteed, but you keep your costs very low. You keep adding to the pot each year. You don't get paralyzed when the market gets killed. On the contrary, if you can, you add to your index fund. But then if you really are wired this way so that you can beat the market, I think you can see the principles at play from the people I write about. You can see that they're all trying to buy stuff cheap. Like Munger said to me, look, the basic thing is you're trying to get more than you're paying for. You're trying to get more prospects than you're paying for.
I have found that many successful people, say many, all of the successful people that I've interviewed on my show, which at this point we're 3,000 episodes into this, they have a routine. And whether it's investing or it's fitness or it's, they have a routine, and all the super successful people adhere to this routine. And this routine is anything but routine for the average person. I want to get your thoughts on the routines you're noticing in terms of how people organize those first 3 or 4 hours of their day. What are some patterns you've seen in terms of how these super successful investors or entrepreneurs, how they organize those first 3 or 4 hours of their day?
I wrote a chapter called High Performance Habits that looks very specifically at how they study the science of habit formation and apply it in their own life. And the chapter starts with a guy called Thomas Gaynor, who's the CEO of a company called Markel, which is a sort of mini Berkshire Hathaway, although not too many. I mean, he has 20,000 employees and it's valued at about $20 billion. And what Tom Gaynor does, I think, is a really good example of a principle that applies in investing, business, and life. So he said, look, I'm not trying to be optimal. What I'm trying to be is, as he puts it, directionally correct and to keep getting a little bit better every day than I was the day before. And so he said there was a point I guess it was about a decade or so, where his weight had drifted from 190 pounds when he was in his late 20s and started in his job at Markel running their investment portfolio, and it gradually drifted north of 200 pounds. And so he said, I'm going to lose 1 pound a year for the next 10 years. And most of us would look at that and say, well, that's absurdly unambitious. Really, that's all you're going to do. But his view is, well, actually, what we've learned from compounding is small advantages compound over time. And so what you want to do is, unlike someone like me who's gradually put on 1 or 2 pounds a year over the last 20 years, he's doing the opposite. So he's just getting these little incremental advantages. But then what he's also doing is what Sir David Brailsford, the coach of the British champion cycling team, once called the aggregation of marginal gains. So you take all of these little things, all of these the tiny habits that give you a marginal gain, and you add them together, you aggregate them. And over time, it becomes overwhelming. So Brailsford did these really kind of trivial sounding things. Like he said to his cyclists, when you travel to be in competitions, bring your own pillow because you're just likely to sleep a little bit better. Wear these heated shorts because you're just likely to get a few less injuries. Put alcohol on the tires of your bike. So it's all of these little things that you get right. And one of the great investors in the book, Nick Sleep, who I wrote about, said to me that was what he saw in the best companies as well. That he said there's not one secret sauce. It's that they do all of these little things right. And so I think there are some really important clues there, both in business and investing and in life, to say, okay, let me find a few habits that I don't have to be the best at, but they need to be directionally correct, and I need to commit to them over time. And if I commit to them over time, over 10, 20, 30 years, the benefits become overwhelming.
You know, in your book, I'm going to pull it up on the screen so our listeners can see this book here, Richer, Wiser, Happier. Richer, Wiser, Happier. I encourage everyone to check it out there, Richer, Wiser, Happier. In this book, it's filled with just endless amounts of success principles, practical, very applicable action items, super moves that you can use in your life. And I'm just going to see if we can have time to unpack 4 of them here with you. One, in your book, you talk about how to win by systemically reducing unoriginal errors. These are errors that are standard stupidities. Talk to us about this. Talk to us about how this principle applies.
Yeah, so this is the great idea that I learned from Munger, right? That's had a profound effect on me in my own life, right? So one of the things that I want to do is say, I want to reduce standard stupidities that can cause absolute disaster, right? So one of the keys to success, both in business and investing and in life, is just to stay in the game, right? So when there's something in your life where there's massive potential downside, you just want to avoid it, right? So think about things like texting in your car, or drunk driving, or cheating on your taxes, or cheating on your spouse. Any of these things where if it goes wrong, the consequences can be disastrous. So this is a beautiful example of something that applies both in investing and life, right? Because in investing, you want to find asymmetric bets where the upside is huge and the downside is really limited. So if you put all of your money in one asset class, or one country, or one bank, or one brokerage firm, in a sense, you're playing with a loaded gun. So I think just the understanding that you want to avoid catastrophe, that you want to stay in the game by avoiding these standard stupidities that blow people out of the water and destroy very promising lives. And so one of the things that Munger said is 3 things ruin people. He said what was it? Drugs, liquor, and leverage. So you don't want to be over leveraged, right? You don't want to have so much debt that when things go wrong, you're going to be the one who's swimming naked when the tide goes out. You don't want to be addicted to drugs. You don't want to be acting in immoral ways that, if you're caught, are going to ruin your reputation or your life. So always avoiding things where the consequence could be catastrophic if it goes wrong.
You know, in your book, you talk about avoiding instant gratification. And that can be tough in a world where, and I'll just give you an example. You know, I have many, many employees that work for me in the businesses that I run and operate, one of which is a dog training business, one is a haircut chain, one is a marketing firm. And there's not a day that goes by. There's not a day, because there's hundreds of employees. There's not a day that goes by that an employee doesn't leave a negative comment online that is not true, or that a customer leaves a review that is not true, or a competitor. So I'll just give you an example. Recently with the hair business, we have a guy who's never been into our place for a haircut, leaves a review that says, "You guys are second rate, overcharged, yada, yada." And I know, and my staff knows, that that particular person is a competitor of ours. Now, I could go on Google and leave a scathing rebuttal, but I know that the average consumer doesn't know that that review was left by a competitor. And so it's so easy, though, just to hit the send button, to write the comment, to post the thing, because everybody is now so connected at all times. And I want to get your wisdom on this, avoiding the short-term instant gratification to pop off and write that thing on social media, or to make that unkind statement, or to cut that corner, or to do something, maybe to eat that thing. Talk to us about the importance of avoiding instant gratification.
Yeah, Warren Buffett said on this front that you can always tell someone to go to hell tomorrow. And I always think of this, right? Whenever I'm inclined to make some sort of emotional decision, I always think, I know that I make terrible decisions when I'm emotional. And there's a remarkable investor who I write about, a guy called Ken Schubenstein, who was a venture capitalist and private equity fund manager, and then quit the investment business and became a neurologist. And one of the things, so he's a real expert on both the brain and investing in business. And he was a professor at Columbia for many years at the business school. And he said to me, because he's so aware of the damage that these negative, fiery emotions could cause, he had a mnemonic, which he'd got from studying addiction literature, where he said, you know that you don't want to make decisions when you're hungry, angry, lonely, tired, in pain, or stressed. So he said he has this mnemonic, HALT PS, to remind him that in these states, he's going to make terrible decisions. So a lot of what he was doing in very practical terms was under extreme stress. He would just slow down. He would say, look, I know that if I'm angry, I'm going to make a terrible decision. And likewise, when he was under tremendous stress during the financial crisis, for example, when people were bailing out of his fund at the worst possible moment, he just said, let me clear my schedule and let me get back to 4 habits that I know are going to help my brain function. And so the 4 habits that we know from scientific literature help your brain function and your brain health are good sleep, exercise, good nutrition, and meditation. So he would try to simplify his life so that he would be less likely to make these really dumb short-term moves that we end up regretting. And so I think that's just a really nice, very practical example of why great investors are worth following, because they're not really just stuck in the theory of observing why we do dumb stuff, which is what people like Daniel Kahneman explain so beautifully. They're actually having to find workarounds to prevent themselves doing dumb stuff. And I think the reason for that is that there's so much money at stake that it kind of forces them to be very practical and pragmatic. And so I think if there's a possibility of you actually losing hundreds of millions of dollars by making an incredibly stupid emotional decision, it makes you think very, very practically about, well, so what kind of tools can I use actually to slow myself down and think better and more and defer this desire to tell everyone to go to hell, or to make decisions in the heat of the moment when most people would panic or get greedy or get fiery in some other way.
Now, one of the things you talk about in your book, again, this this book is Richer, Wiser, Happier. Again, in this book, Richer, Wiser, Happier, you talk about one way to become successful is to shamelessly borrow the ideas, the best ideas from others. And I think in entrepreneurship, that can seem like a no-no where everyone's trying to reinvent the wheel. Can you talk to us about that? Your thoughts on how some of the most successful people have actually copied or modeled their business based upon the best ideas of other super successful people?
Yeah, the first chapter of the book is about an extraordinary guy called Monish Pabrai, who I traveled to India with. He's this guy with an IQ in the 180s, I mean, very brilliant guy, who basically said he was in an airport in England, and he picks up a book by Peter Lynch that talks about Warren Buffett, and he starts to realize from reading Lynch just how extraordinary Buffett is, and he understands that Buffett has won the game of compounding. So he says, well, what would happen if I reverse engineer what Buffett has figured out and just apply those rules? And turn $1 million into $1 billion by playing this 30-year game of compounding. And so he really did reverse engineer what Buffett and later Munger, who became a great mentor of his, had figured out about the laws of investing. And what astonished Monish was that once he figured out what these rules were, he looks around at all the other fund managers and discovers that none of them are actually applying the same rules. And he said what was so extraordinary was that there's something almost in like human DNA that makes us resist really great ideas that people who are smarter, wiser, or more experienced have already figured out. And he said, well, look, if they're not going to do it, let me, the Indian guy, do it. I'm shameless about cloning. And he said that what he does is he just goes around looking at any industry and he studies it really carefully and he figures out what actually works. And so he read the book and it actually changed the way he invested, because he said, I read chapter 6, which is about this guy, Nick Sleep. And I see that Nick Sleep is obsessed, Nick and his partner, Kay Sicario, were obsessed with this idea of scale economies shared, which is what Costco embodies and also Amazon embodies, where they were saying, okay, well, as we get bigger, instead of just stuffing our pockets with our profits, we're going to share them with our customers. And so their size actually no longer becomes an anchor, it becomes an advantage. And so they keep growing in scale. So Monish looks at this and he says, the 3 most important words in your book are scale economies shared, and it's going to change the way I invest. So he's just going through the world with this idea that anytime he comes across a good idea, he's going to apply it in his own life. And he did this with his philanthropy as well. He did this extraordinary thing where he finds a charity in India called the Super 30 that finds these really brilliant kids across India who came from incredibly poor families, and gave them free coaching, 30 of these kids a year, and got them into the Indian equivalent of MIT. And so Monish has basically done this on an industrial scale. So he's cloned that idea, but he's actually lifted thousands and thousands of families out of poverty, basically by borrowing this idea shamelessly, doing it even better. And then what he did, instead of just training them to get into the best engineering school, he started to train them to get into the best medical schools as well. So it's not just about cloning in this kind of dumb, slavish way. It's about looking at what works, figuring out how do I apply it to my own circumstances and my own temperament, to my own character and my own skills, and then actually improving it where you can. And so he is a shameless cloner, but in some really powerful sense, he's actually become better than the original.
Now, my final question I have here for you is you have been on many, many interviews, and I'm sure that people who've interviewed you are all, with an exception of myself, brilliant people. And they've probably asked you questions where you say, man, that was good. But you've also probably had interviews where you get off the interview and you say, you know, I wish they would have asked me that right there. I wish we would have talked about that. We should have gone there with it. Is there anything on your heart and your mind and your soul right now that you really want to communicate to our listeners? Or maybe is there a question that you wish that I would have asked? Or I just want to hear your heart there during these final 90 seconds we have you.
I think one of the most important things that I explore in the epilogue of the book is about what actually leading a really rich life means. And so I have this cohort of people that I spent hundreds of hours interviewing who in many ways are icons of richness, right? I mean, they're people who have yachts and planes and mansions and art collections and the like. But I really look at them and I say, yeah, but what actually does the money give them? and what doesn't the money give them. And so what the epilogue explores, which I think is hugely important to our listeners, is this idea that really what the money gives these people is independence. It's not the luxuries that really matter. What it gives them is the ability to construct a life that's true to who they are in all of their weirdness and idiosyncrasy. And that actually doesn't require you to be a billionaire. What it requires is the self-awareness to say, well, this is what a rich life looks like for me. And one of the things that I see is that a lot of these incredibly financially and professionally successful people that I write about, many of whom are billionaires, is that they actually have pretty miserable personal lives, right? So many of them ended up divorced. So many of them end up with kids who are miserable or don't talk to them. So many of them end up unbelievably stressed and dysfunctional. And so I think you have to look at them and say, what is it that I actually want to clone and replicate? The thing I want to clone and replicate is living a life that's true to who I am, where I have tremendous autonomy, where I don't have to take crap from anyone I dislike or disrespect. I can live in a way that's true to who I am. But I think also one of the things that I realized is that a real key to a truly happy and truly rich and truly abundant life is to have peace of mind. And so you have to figure out, how am I going to optimize for that, right? Because if you're a billionaire, but you're just massively stressed out, or you have family that hates you, it's going to be kind of miserable. So you have to really focus on peace of mind, rich relationships. And I think in many cases, what you discover is actually that the relationships turn out to be the greatest investment of all. And so when I asked Charlie Munger what we could learn from him and Warren Buffett about how to have a happy life, he just immediately started talking about relationships. And he said, look, we have a very simple method. He said, if you want to have a good partner, be a good partner. And he said, in the same way, if you want to have a good spouse, deserve one. And so I think just thinking about for our listeners, just to say, okay, yes, I want to be rich. Yes, I want to be successful, but I don't want to do it in a way where I sacrifice my partners, I sacrifice my clients, I sacrifice my friends and my kids, I sacrifice my mental health. I want to be rich in this broad sense that includes good health, happiness, peace of mind, great relationships. And so I just would really encourage people not to clone the wrong thing from the greatest investors. Clone a lot of the ways they think and their ability to think intelligently and wisely and independently, but also think about what will actually create a truly rich life for yourself.
Now, folks, that book, one more time, if you haven't checked it out there yet, it is Richer, Wiser, and Happier. It's Richer, Wiser, Happier. The book is written by William Green. It's highly endorsed by Charlie Munger and countless other people. It has over 4,000 objective Amazon.com reviews, so I encourage you to check it out. Richer, Wiser, Happier. Again, folks, if you don't hate yourself, check out the book, Richer, Wiser, Happier. Also, folks, if you're in your car listening to today's podcast, as so many of you do, or maybe you're navigating down a gravel road while riding on a skateboard while taking notes with a Sharpie. I'll repeat it again. That's Richer, Wiser, Happier. Get the book today. Richer, Wiser, Happier. Get the book today. There's a lot to learn there. William Green, thank you for investing your most precious asset, which is your time, to be here with us today. We really do appreciate you, sir.
Thank you. It's such a delight chatting with you. You're a great interviewer. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Thrivetime show, that's where you wanna be.
That's where you want to be.
Thrivetime show, that's where you wanna be. Yeah. Business growth is what you wanna see.
What you want to see.
Thrivetime show, that's where you wanna be. Where you wanna be, yeah. If you've got the big goals to achieve, to achieve it.
For entrepreneurs, it's a paradise. For employees, it's a change paradigm. For the poor and ignored, it's a change mind. For the explorers, it's a major find. For Tim Tebow, it's goals aligned. For the Eric to the Trump, it's a mastermind. For Robert Kiyosaki, it's game time. For the first time attendees, it's oh my. For the Oklahomies, it's a sweet home of mine. For the real business people, it's so nice. For the people going places, it's a green light. For you and your crew, it's a change vibe. For this rendezvous, you can name your prize. For the VIP, ticks 105 times. For me, it's what I do, it's my vibe. Because the Thrivetime Nation is my tribe.
My tribe. Thrivetime show, that's where you wanna be. Yeah.
business growth is what you wanna see.
What you wanna see?
Thrivetime show, that's where you wanna be. Where you wanna be, yeah, yeah. If you got the big goals to achieve, yeah, you got to achieve it. It's time to thrive, what a time to be alive. Breath in my lungs, thank you, Jesus Christ. You got a chance to cause change upon the land. So beat that clock by your diligence. It's up to you, do you prefer to keep making the wrong turns, or to turn it all around until you take the time to learn? Without vision, the people perish. Lack wisdom, you get embarrassed. Or be humble, grow 1,000-fold. Reap a harvest and share it.
Can we kick it? Yes, we can. If you come with business problems, you leave with plans. At the Thrivetime Show, we make wealth expand. And we're focused on implementation. We teach marketing and improving your brand. How to build the systems and finance. We teach how to hire people and manage them. How to bring your dreams into reality. Since 05, I've been doing it, cause that's my jam. Helping goal pursuers do it, putting cash in their hands. Now that Eric Trump has joined us, he has joined the band. Kiyosaki's coming too, cause he's in the rhythm. But can he kick it? Yeah, yes he can. Kiyosaki's in the dojo of self-discipline. So get your tickets now at Thrivetime Show. And I'd buy them now while they're still on hand.
Thrivetime Show, that's where you wanna be. Yeah. Business growth is what you wanna see. What you wanna see. Thrivetime Show, that's where you wanna be. Where you wanna be, yeah, yeah. If you got the big goals to achieve, yeah, you got to achieve it. Thrivetime Show, that's where you wanna be. Yeah. Business growth is what you wanna see. What you wanna see. Thrivetime Show, that's where you wanna be. Where you wanna be, yeah, yeah. If you got the big goals to achieve, yeah, you got to achieve it.
Clay Clark is here somewhere. Where's my buddy Clay? Clay's the greatest. I met his goats today. I met his dogs. I met his chickens. I saw his compound. He's like the greatest guy.
I ran from his goats, his chickens, his dogs.
So this guy's like the greatest marketer you've ever seen, right? His entire life, Clay Clark, his entire life is marketing.
Okay, Aaron Antis, March 6th and 7th. March 6th and 7th, guess who's coming to Tulsa, Jerusalem?
Ooh, Santa Claus?
No, that's March. March 6th and 7th, we're going to be joined by Robert Kiyosaki.
Robert Kiyosaki.
Best-selling author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Probably the best-selling, or one of the best-selling business authors of all time. And he's going to be joined with Eric Trump. He'll be joined by Eric Trump. So we got Eric Trump and Robert Kiyosaki in the same place.
In the same place.
Aaron, why should everybody show up to hear Robert Kiyosaki?
Well, you got billions of dollars of business experience between those two, not to mention many, many, many millions of books have been sold. Many, many millionaires have been made from the books that have been sold by Robert Kiyosaki. I happen to be one of them. I learned from the man. He was the inspiration. That book was the inspiration for me to get the entrepreneurial spirit, as many other people.
Now, since you won't brag on yourself, I will. You've sold billions of dollars of houses, am I correct?
That is true.
And the book that kickstarted it all for you,
Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Rich Dad, Poor Dad, the author, the best-selling author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki, the guy that kickstarted your career.
Yeah.
He's going to be here.
He's going to be here. I'm pumped.
And now Eric Trump, people don't know this, but the Trump organization has thousands of employees. There's not 50 employees. The Trump organization, again, most people don't know this, but the Trump organization has thousands of employees. And while Donald J. Trump was the 45th president of these United States and soon to be the 47th president of these United States, he needed someone to run the companies for him. And so the man that runs the Trump organization for Donald J. Trump, as he was the 45th president of the United States and now the 47th president of the United States, is Eric Trump. And so Eric Trump is here to talk about time management, promoting from within, marketing, branding, quality control, sales systems, workflow design, workflow mapping, how to build. I mean, everything that you see, the Trump hotels, the Trump golf courses, all their products, the man who manages billions of dollars of real estate and thousands of employees is here to teach us how to do it.
You are talking about one of the greatest brands on the planet from a business standpoint.
Right.
I mean, who else has been able to create a brand like the Trump brand? I mean, look at it. And this is the man behind the business for the last pretty much since 2015. he's been the man behind it. So you're talking, we're into 9 going into 10 years of him running it, and we get to tap into that knowledge. That's going to be amazing.
Now, think about this for a second. Would you buy a ticket just to see Robert Kiyosaki and Eric Trump? Of course you would.
Of course you would.
But we're also going to be joined by Sean Baker. This is the best-selling author, the guy who invented the carnivore diet.
Oh, yeah.
Dr. Sean Baker. He's been on Joe Rogan multiple times. He's going to be joining us. So you've got Robert Kiyosaki, the best-selling author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Eric Trump, Sean Baker. The lineup continues to grow, and this is how we do our tickets here at the Thrivetime Show. If you want to get a VIP ticket, you can absolutely do it. It's $500 for a VIP ticket. We've always done it that way. Now, if you want to take a general admission ticket, it's $250 or whatever price you want to pay. And the reason why I do that, and the reason why we do that is because we want to make our events affordable for everybody. I grew up without money. I totally understand what it's like to be in a tight spot. So if you want to attend, it's $250 or whatever price you want to pay. That's how I do it. And it's $500 for a VIP ticket. Now, we only have limited seating here. With the most people we've ever had in this building was for the Jim Brewer presentation. Jim Brewer came here, the legendary comedian Jim Brewer came to Tulsa, and we had 419 people that were here. 419 people.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, there's no more room. I felt kind of bad that if a couple people had VIP seats in the men's restroom. Oh, no, I'm just kidding. But I thought, you know what, we should probably add on. So we're adding on what we call the upper deck, or the top shelf. So the seats are very close to the presenters, but we're actually building right now. We're adding on to the facility to make room to accommodate about another 30 attendees or more. So again, if you want to get tickets for this event, all you have to do is go to thrivetimeshow.com. Go to thrivetimeshow.com. When you go to thrivetimeshow.com, you'll go there, you'll request a ticket, boom. Or if you want to text me, if you want a little bit faster service, you say, I want you to call me right now. Just text my number. It's my cell phone number, my personal cell phone number. We'll keep that private between you, me, everybody. We'll keep that private. In anybody. Don't share that with anybody except for everybody. That's my private cell phone number. It's 918-851-0102. 918-851-0102. I know we have a lot of Spanish-speaking people that attend these conferences, and to be bilingually sensitive, my cell phone number is 918-851-0102.
That is not actually bilingual. That's just saying Juan for a one. It's not the same thing.
I think you're attacking me. Now, let's talk about this. Now, what kind of stuff will you learn at the Thrivetime Show workshop? So, Aaron, you've been to many of these over the past 7-8 years. So let's talk about it. I'll tee up the thing, and then you tell me what you're going to learn here, okay?
Okay. Yeah.
You're going to learn marketing and branding. What are we going to learn about marketing and branding?
Oh, yeah. We're going to dive into, so many people say, I got to get my brand known out there, like the Trump brand, right? You want to get that brand out there. It's like, how do I actually make people know what my business is and make it a household name? You're going to learn some intricacies of how you can do that.
You're going to learn sales. So many people struggle to sell something. This just in, your business will go to hell if you can't sell. So we're going to teach you sales. We're going to teach you search engine optimization, how to come up top in the search engine results. We're going to teach you how to manage people. Aaron, you have managed, no exaggeration, hundreds of people throughout your career and thousands of contractors, and most people struggle with managing people. Why does everybody have to learn how to manage people?
Well, because first of all, you either have great people or you have people who suck, and so it can be a challenge. Learning how to work with a large group of people and get everybody pulling in the same direction can be a challenge. But if you have the right systems, you have the right processes, and you're really good at selecting great ones, and we have a process we teach about how to find great people. When you start with the people who have a great attitude, they're teachable, they're driven, all of those things, then you can get those people all pulling in the same direction.
So we're going to teach you branding, marketing, sales, search engine optimization. We're going to teach you accounting. We're going to teach you personal finance, how to manage your finance. We're going to teach you time management. How do you manage your time? How do you get more done during a typical day? How do you build an organization if you're not organized? How do you do organization? How do you build an org chart? Everything that you need to know to start and grow a business will be taught during this 2-day interactive business workshop. Now, let me tell you how the format is set up here. And again, folks, this is a 2-day interactive 15. Think about this, folks. It's 2 days. Each day it starts at 7 a.m. and it goes until 5 p.m. So from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m., 2 days. It's a 2-day interactive workshop. The way we do it is we do a 30-minute teaching session, and then we break for 15 minutes for a question and answer session. So, Aaron, what kind of great stuff happens during that 15-minute question and answer session after every teaching session?
I actually think it's the best part about the workshops, because here's what happens. I've been to lots of these things over the years. I've paid many thousands of dollars to go to them. And you go in there and they talk in vague generalities, and they're constantly upselling you for something, trying to get you to buy this thing or that thing or this program or this membership. And you leave not getting your very specific questions answered about your business or your employees or what you're doing on your marketing. And what's awesome about this is we literally answer every single question that any person asks, and it's very specific to what your business is.
And what we do is we allow you as the attendee to write your questions on the whiteboard.
Yep.
And then we literally, as you mentioned, we answer every single question on the whiteboard. And then we take a 15-minute break to stretch and to make it entertaining when you're stretching. And this is a true story. When you get up and stretch, you'll be greeted by mariachis.
Sure.
There's going to probably be alpaca here, llamas, helicopter rides, a coffee bar, a snow cone. There's just...
You had a crocodile one time. That was pretty interesting.
You know, I should write that down and I can do that.
Sorry for that one guy that we lost.
The crocodile, we duct taped its face so that we duct taped.
No, it was a baby crocodile.
And it was duct tape.
Yeah, duct tape around the mouth so it didn't bite anybody. But it was really cool passing that thing around and
I should do that. I should. We have a small petting zoo that will be assembled. It's going to be great. And then you're in the company of hundreds of entrepreneurs. So there's not a lot of people in America today. In fact, there's less than 10 million people today, according to U.S. Debt Clock, that identify as being self-employed. So if you have a country with 350 million people, that means you have less than 3% of our population that's even self-employed. Yeah. So you only have 3 out of every 100 people in America that are self-employed to begin with. And when Inc. magazine reports that 96% of businesses fail by default, you have a 1 out of 1,000 chance of succeeding in the game of business.
It's tough.
But yet the average client that you and I work with, we can typically double this. And this is no hyperbole, no exaggeration. And I have thousands of testimonials to back this up. We have thousands of testimonials to back it up. But when you work with a home builder, when I work with a business owner, we can typically double the size of the company within 24 months.
Yeah.
Double. And you say double? Yeah, there's businesses that we have tripled. There's businesses we've grown 8x. There's so many examples you can see at thrivetimeshow.com. But again, this is the most interactive, best business workshop on the planet. This is objectively the highest rated and most reviewed business workshop on the planet. And then you add to that Robert Kiyosaki, the best-selling author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad. You add to that Eric Trump, the man that runs the Trump Organization. You add to that Sean Baker. Now you might say, but Clay, is there more? I need more. Well, okay, Tom Wheelwright is the wealth strategist for Robert Kiyosaki. So people say, Robert Kiyosaki, who's his financial wealth advisor? Who's the guy who manages, who's his wealth strategist? His wealth strategist, Tom Wheelwright, will be here. And you say, Clay, I'm not going to get a ticket unless you give me more. Okay, fine. We're going to serve you the same meal both days. True story. We cater in the food, and because I keep it simple, I literally bring in the same food both days for lunch. It's Ted Escondido's, an incredible Mexican restaurant. That's going to happen. And Jill Donovan, our good friend, who is the founder of Rustic Cuff. She started that company in her home, and now she sells millions of dollars of apparel and products. That's rusticcuff.com. And someone says, I want more. This is not enough.
Give me more.
Okay. I'm not going to mention their names right now because I'm working on it behind the scenes here. But we've got one guy who's given me a verbal to be here. And this is a guy who's one of the wealthiest people in Oklahoma, and nobody really knows who he is because he's built systems that are very utilitarian, that offer a lot of value. He's made a lot of money in it's where you rent. It's short term. It's where you're renting storage spaces. He's a storage space guy. He owns what do you call that? The rental,
storage space.
Storage units. This guy owns storage units. He owns railroad cars. He owns a lot of assets that make money on a daily basis, but they're not like customer facing. Most people don't know who owns the mini storage facility, or most people don't know who owns the warehouse that's passively making money. Most people don't know who owns the railroad cars, but this guy, he's given me a verbal that he will be here, and we just continue to add more and more success stories. So if you're out there today and you want to change your life, you want to give yourself an incredible gift, You want a life-changing experience. You want to learn how to start and grow a company. Go to thrivetimeshow.com. Go there right now. thrivetimeshow.com. Request a ticket for the 2-day interactive event. Again, the day here is March 6th and 7th. March 6th and 7th, we just got confirmation. Robert Kiyosaki, best-selling author, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, he'll be here. Eric Trump, the man who leads the Trump organization. It's going to be a blasty blast. There's no upsells. Aaron, I could not be more excited about this event.
I think it is incredible. And there's somebody out there right now, you're watching and you're like, but I already signed up for this incredible other program called Smoke Your Way to Thin. I think that's going to change your life. I promise you, this will be 10 times better than that.
Looks like I picked the wrong week to quit smoking.
Don't do the Smoke Your Way to Thin conference. That is, I've tried it. Don't do it.
Yeah, chain smoking is not a viable. I mean, it is life-changing. It is life-changing. If you become a chain smoker, it is life-changing.
Not the best weight loss program, though.
Right, really.
So
if you're looking to have life-changing results in a way that won't cause you to have a stoma, get your tickets at thrivetimeshow.com. Again, that's Aaron Antis. I'm Clay Clark, and reminding you and inviting you to come out to the 2-day interactive Thrive Time Show workshop right here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I promise you, it will be a life-changing experience. We can't wait to see you right here in Tulsa, Oklahoma.